see you guys.
You too.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
So in my full-time day job, I have a venture capital firm, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the delta between narratives and realities. And it's amazing if you go back in time and study the history of businesses and startups, what you find. Here's a story. A company that today is hugely successful, but in its early days, the founder had a great idea, can't really get it off the ground, does huge demonstrations of the product. They're all successful. Investors don't really get it. Eventually, his sons take over the business, and after many years of M&A, scale it up, and it becomes the default setting in their vertical. Anyone know who I'm talking about? American company, 100 years ago? Otis Elevator. I mean, the crazy thing about Otis, Elisha Otis demonstrated his elevator in 1854. Wasn't successful for decades. He dies, his sons take it over. 30 years of M&A. Today, Otis is the default setting. But no one knows this, because the narrative of success is the only thing we remember. Which brings us to our friends from Carvana, who have absolutely one of the coolest and most fantastic stories I'm aware of, certainly in transportation startups. It's absolutely fascinating. And the great historian of science, Ludwig Fleck, would say the straight path to progress is a lie. It is a lie. Carvana went through hoops to get to where it is today. I can't wait to hear this crazy story. Let's get started with your history. 2012, you're founded. Your mission is to change the way people buy and sell cars. Sold your first car in 2013. By 2017, 34 in the Inc. 5000. IPO 4 years later, down 41% in the first 4 days.
Whoops.
One of the worst IPOs in history, bless your hearts. All right, the pandemic hits, and thankfully your product, does everyone here know what Carvana does? Why it's so great? No one makes it easier to buy or sell a used car. That's it, end of story. That's the story. So touchless deliveries mean during the pandemic, your sales go crazy. You doubled year over year through 2021, third fastest company to make the Fortune 500. Stock price says 370. Nice job, guys. Nice job. Very good. And then
Another
demand
whoops.
Creators.
Another whoops.
December 2022, stock down 99%. From $370 to $3.72. I bought some, can't lie. But at the time, I was a journalist.
How you can afford that sweet jacket?
Well, the thing is, I never covered you, so as a journalist, I just saw a company that's cool. I'm gonna go get some of this stock, it's cool. All right, today, Carvana, as of this morning, Carvana is back at 326. So, one of the greatest comeback stories in the history of American business, the fastest growing, most profitable retailer in your vertical in history. All right, I'm done talking. I want to hear how this happened, because this is truly crazy. And if, as an investor, a founder came to me and said, I've got an idea, I'd be like, I don't know. All right, the early days, 2013. What made you think anyone would want to buy a car online?
Can we hit this one?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, well, first of all, thank you guys for having us, and congrats to everyone out there. I think, so we started in 2012, and we sold our first car in 2013. I think, I kind of grew up around the auto business, and, generally speaking, there's a lot of car dealers out there that do a great job, but I think a lot of people make a lot of jokes about, car salesmen and buying a car, and it's not the most beloved consumer experience. And so I think we asked the question, why is that? Is it something inherent to the car? Is it something about the process? Is it something that can be fixed? And I think one of the indicators of opportunity that exists everywhere is whenever an industry has been stagnant for a very long time, something that is always true is consumer preferences are constantly changing and technology is constantly changing. But I think if businesses are sufficiently hard to build, once a solution gets built that works, it can get locked into place, and building some alternative can take so much effort and so much time that just nothing else gets built, and you can have a solution that lasts for a very long time. And I think buying cars the traditional way has been around for almost 100 years now. And so I think our view was, if we can build a different supply chain, if we can build self-service tools, if we can make this way less pressure, we can change the economics, we don't need to have customers in the back room for 3 hours to make up all of our expenses, that'll make for a simpler transaction. Unfortunately, it meant that we had to build, reconditioning centers to take used cars and get them ready for the next owner. We had to build our own logistics network. We had to build a fully transactional website that included financing and trade-ins and title and registration. We had, last mile delivery. We had to build a brand. And I think, like all entrepreneurs, we probably had no idea how much work that was going to be. But we were, I think not knowing is like the best possible thing because it causes you to jump and then you're kind of in too deep to do anything else. And I think that's probably why our story has been, such a roller coaster. But I think the idea was always right, and I think the path there was always going to be hard. But so far it's going okay with a couple, funny moments in between.
What was the precipitating event or experience that just like, I've got to do this. We have to do this. Because I know every friend of mine who goes to try to buy a used car says, unless it's from you, of course, says they hate it. They absolutely hate it. What was the precipitating event?
I would just add what Ernie was saying there. I think there was like a singular event, but I think it's like a combination of a lot there too, because typically it's a considered purchase, right? It's something that happens once every 4 years, kind of like buying a car. It's the second biggest purchase ever. And a lot of times you go through that experience and like there's the high of getting a new car. It may have not been the best experience, but over time you kind of forget what that purchase experience was like. And I think when you speak with enough people too, it's like, hey, I had to spend 4 hours on a Saturday, it wasn't really great. I got financing, but they went kind of away and came back, and my terms, I didn't really know if that was good, or bad, or otherwise. We kind of moved forward. I think there's enough of those kind of stories out there that was just like, hey, there is kind of a trade being made here where there's an experience that currently exists. People don't necessarily enjoy it, and it comes at a cost. And I think when you look at that enough, either through a customer experience, kind of like problem or solution, or an economics one, I think that is kind of like the realization. It certainly wasn't like, hey, everything is moving in mass online. What isn't someone done yet? Let's do cars, right? It definitely wasn't that. It was more from a economics and a customer experience, I think, solution.
And I'm going to jump back in too. We were horrible at raising money. We went public as a 4-year-old company because we couldn't raise money in Silicon Valley, and we couldn't get press to save our lives, which like matters a lot because it's basically free advertising when you're a startup. And the reason is because when someone would ask like, hey, what was the moment where you realize you should sell cars this way, we would answer like that. So I don't know, we were supposed to have like a better founding story. For us, it was more about like economics and nerdery, so forgive us.
Because if someone asked me, I'd be like, have you been to a car dealership?
Yeah.
Boom, that's why we
perfect.
have to exist.
Yeah, and I think with it too,
you could have raised money.
We didn't launch in Silicon Valley like a lot of that, right? We were in Phoenix, Arizona. Our first launch market was Atlanta. It was very different, right? So that story didn't really perfectly connect. And at the time too, was marketplaces were the hot thing. And we're a deeply vertically integrated business that had a lot of costs to be able to build. And we had a different approach, but I think it did kind of, it made us, I think, have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder and wanted to be able to kind of continue to innovate and iterate and build it ourselves. And I think that for the long run put us in a really good spot.
Well, as a VC today, I can tell you most VCs are intellectually lazy and challenged in seeing the merit of actually doing real disruption. So don't tell any VCs I said that. All right, so when did you realize you could actually scale the business? Like when was that, like we could do this?
Well, I'll tell two quick stories on that. I think first, I was involved in another startup prior that didn't work, which I think was an incredible experience that I would not take back, and I'm like very glad in retrospect that I went through. And then I think in this, when you're first starting, the key is, can you tell a story and can you get people, to believe that you can do it? Whether it's people that are going to work at the company or, investors that we were no good with, whatever. But that's what matters. Then you build a product. Then you start delivering actual experiences, and you have to build ops, and then you hope that the business works. And those are kind of like the steps. And I think when we first started selling cars, I remember one conversation with the third co-founder, Ben Houston, who's our COO, and he was like, this one's gonna work. And I was like, okay, good. Why do you think that? Like, give me a good reason. And he's like, we're doing what we said we're gonna do. When we deliver a car to a customer, it's a great experience. It's super simple. They're excited. It's like real, tangible enthusiasm that you can feel. And he's like, it's gonna work. And at this point in time, we're selling one car every 4 days. And I remember sort of like fantasizing with him. When I talk on the phone, I go, like pace around outside. And so I'm in our parking lot, I'm walking back and forth, and I was like, hey, it's not gonna be long, we're gonna sell one car every day. And he was like, I don't know, like trying to imagine that. But anyway, that's not that long ago, right? It's like, it's funny, things can happen fast. Like it never feels like there's this moment where everything changes. If you just kind of get a little better every day, but you do that, a couple thousand days in a row, things are very, very different pretty quickly.
I'm fascinated by the scaling question because you guys, what makes the experience great just from the get-go is the website. The pictures of the cars, the clarity, all the information. I'm shocked, frankly, that everyone hasn't duplicated this all these years later. So you had to have basically an assembly line of content creation, put the cars into it, to scale up the content around the cars to sell the cars. What was the process behind that in the beginning, the photo booth, and how did you increase the efficiency of the content creation around the product?
Yeah, I'll take this one first. I think it was a little bit of like, build it and they will come. I think we had a lot of conviction, right, that, hey, this could work, selling online. It gives people a lot of more like potentially savings and a lot of selection, but what it does create is a little bit of distance between you and the car itself, right? And people are typically used to going to a dealership, walking around that car and kind of seeing it in real life. And we said, hey, if we're gonna do this, we need to invest a lot of money. And it was a significant amount of money to be able to build these photo booths, to capture these cars. And it wasn't just like, well, everybody else is doing it where like, let's just do handheld photos. It was, no, how about this? Let's create a unique system where the car spins in 360 degrees and it captures all these photos. And we create technology that stitches it all together so people can spin it around, they can zoom in, they can fly into the interior. Oh, and because we're introducing transparency, let's do imperfections, right? Let's actually show the things that aren't necessarily perfect on that vehicle. I think a lot of those kind of decisions we had to make enabled us to like create that experience that we wanted, but it had to have a lot of conviction to be able to say like, this is the right way to go about that, and how to be presented in a way, in a UX that people can understand and is transparent and that people can enjoy.
I wish someone would take your approach and apply that to buying real estate and standardizing the kind of content you can see. For a much bigger purchase, shock, that's another conference. Okay.
People are working on it.
Yeah.
I've seen some of those solutions, but I feel like no one has solved it the way Carvana did back in the day. What year did you deploy the photo booth? Was it out of the gate?
Out of the gates, yeah.
What year did you put up the first vending machine, the big tower we see over by the highway over here?
That was pretty quick. Was that 14 maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was maybe late 14.
There was different variations of that, right? There was in Atlanta, as Ernie said, like our first year, we thought, hey, we have truth on our side, everyone's gonna love this experience, we're gonna be selling so many cars. We were selling 10 cars a month, and that was for quite a long time. And so that was a bit of a struggle, but there was a point.
In fairness, quite a long time was like 4 months. But it felt like a really long time.
It felt like a really long time, exactly. But we realized like, hey, we need to be able to like provide something. We're giving this transparency and control in different parts of the business, whether it's financing or what have you. And around the same time, we said, hey, we need to like build more trust, because right now we're an unknown entity in Atlanta selling used cars. We're doing it online, and people don't necessarily know like, are you a dealer in disguise or not? And the idea was like, well, let's do a bigger sort of advertising campaign to sort of build that trust. But at the same time, we need to give customers control and a selection, so this dealer's not coming to their house, because we launched with delivery only. And the idea was like, well, let's create something. What could be an experience where people could pick up the car, but it can't be a dealership in disguise? And so we were throwing a bunch of stuff back and forth, and we're like, well, what if it was a car vending machine? And you're like, oh, that sounds super cool. And like anything, we have to go figure out how to do it. Our first one is very much like a service center, where you had like just the bay doors. A customer would show up, and like we would tell them they had a unique code, but in reality it was like 1111. The doors would open up, and like that was our car vending machine. But we saw that like the reaction to that, it's like we were able to get some press for it. It was unique, and like, hey, there is truly something here. And we saw that like customers could get the car a little bit sooner than delivery, and all these downstream effects. And so from there it was like, all right, let's actually build one. And the first one we did was in Nashville, and that was our 5-story one. That same thing had last minute with Ernie and I being like, what if it was coin operated? And we actually did it where like someone would show up, we'd give them a coin, their car would already be there staged. You put the coin in, it comes to life, brings it all the way down, the doors open. And that was huge for us, right? Huge for building, I think, legitimacy, awareness, trust. And operationally, it was really great for us, because we could it's almost like candy. The more cars you put in that, the more you could service. And almost the spread operationally between delivering a car and getting one picked up enabled us to build those towers, which had the feedback effect of like, oh my gosh, now it's on the side of the road, and it's a huge awareness builder. So a lot of people say it's like, oh, is it a bit of a gimmick? And you could say potentially, but it's amazing customer experience. It's amazing for awareness building, and operationally, it helps us be more efficient. That enables us to build those and generate that flywheel again and again.
It's the first thing I think of when I think of Carvana, and it's the first fresh visual idea there is in selling a car since delivering to your house. And so I love those things.
Well, but what you just said is important, because I think for acquiring customers is one of the hardest things you ever do, right? And I think if you can build in customer acquisition to your actual business, it can be very efficient. There's like this heuristic that people have probably heard that it costs $1 billion to build a brand. And I just think it's so amazing that, to this day, we've got 40 vending machines around the country. It's way less than that. But I do think every customer, if you ask them, what do you think about Carvana? They know about the vending machines. And so it's one of these funny things where it can feel gimmicky, it can feel like, how does that fit into this business model? But it's so important to try to acquire customers and do something that is notable that people remember.
That's good job.
Thanks.
All right.
Give it to Keaton.
All right, let's talk about the mood and the culture side of the company from startup to IPO in 4 years. The stress levels are enormous. Walk us through going from crazy early stress to, oh my God, we have to IPO, here's the timeline.
Sure, so first of all, Ryan talked about selling 10 cars a month for several months. It's like, that was the first time where I remember being like, wow, I went in a conference room with everyone in the company, it's like 15 people at that time, and I drew on a whiteboard and I was like, here's what we're gonna do. And we totally fell on our face compared to what I had drawn on that whiteboard. And you have to pull everyone back in, and it's like, when you fall on your face, people have to decide, does this mean you don't know what you're talking about in general, or does this mean that this was a little harder than we thought? And you when you're just starting, you don't know to prepare for being wrong. You just kind of think you're right, and you just kind of start saying stuff. And then all of a sudden, you kind of wear being wrong over and over again. And I think going through that is probably something that every startup goes through, because very few things happen the way that you kind of draw them up on the board the first day. And I think it ended up being very helpful for us, because we went through a lot of that. We were horrible at raising money, like I said. We did not fit the Silicon Valley kind of theme of the day. I do think Silicon Valley is incredible at being differentiated relative to the mass of investors in the world. But generally speaking, a lot of Silicon Valley tends to have themes that they collectively believe in at any point in time. And I think it's tough to deviate from that. So when we were going out, everyone believed in marketplaces. Having a finance business was insane. FinTech wasn't a thing yet. Being vertically integrated wasn't, that was insane. Full stack wasn't a thing yet. Those narratives kind of came later. And so we really struggled, and we basically went public because we had to. There's there is an investor class that is more comfortable with pre-existing, disruption to pre-existing businesses, because they know there's economics in that business, they know what the scale of that business can be. And that was more like a New York type investor than a Silicon Valley kind of West Coast type investor. And so we barely got out the door. We struggled to raise private funding, 2 or 3 times, and basically, or near-death experiences every single time. And so we're like, okay, we got to try to go public, and then barely got out the door, and then had the worst New York Stock Exchange debut, I believe, of all time. I'm not certain that's true, but I believe it certainly felt like it was true. But I think luckily, because we sat in that conference room and fell on our face very early on, before we went public, we pulled everyone together and we said, listen, when you go public, we have no idea what's going to happen to the stock. We can't think about this as being any different than when we were private, right? We've got a 10, 20, 30-year plan that we're going to keep running toward. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. Every stock you've ever heard of has gone way down on 2 or 3 occasions.
Not
when
that
that
much.
happens, please, not 99. Agreed. So but generally speaking, many great companies have gone down more than 80. Amazon went down 96 or 97. So these things do happen, and I think if you set people up for that, you at least give yourself a chance where the next time you fall on your face, people kind of are like, okay, well, he kind of told me this might happen, so maybe he's not totally wrong.
Most startups outsource as much as they can. You're the opposite of that. Why?
Ego, I think, probably. No, I actually think, so I do generally think, this is my personal take, I think vertical integration is, generally speaking, a better consumer solution, but your odds of success are way lower. I think every problem you try to solve, the more problems that you have in sequence, the lower your odds are of making it across. But when you vertically integrate, you have complete control of the system, and especially when customer experience matters a lot, it's having control of the system means that you have the ability to make it simple for customers. You can absorb all the complicated things to make it easy for customers. And so from the very beginning, we were kind of like, hey, we need to get rid of, again, my personal take, I think many of the things that make automotive retail, for new or used, difficult, basically fundamentally reduce down to like incentive frictions between different parties that are partnering together, from the OEM to the dealer to finance companies, all these to the even at the dealership, the GM, sales guy, F&I. There's different people with different incentives inside the system, and the sum of those incentives clashing creates, I think, a longer and more difficult experience. And so we believe that if we could control all of that, we could make it way simpler, and didn't appreciate how hard that made the problem. But that's why we started out with that view. And I think it has served us very well in the sense that I think we've built a business that's pretty different. But I think it also is the reason that we've gone through a bunch of tough times.
Yeah. You stated that you had to IPO because you couldn't raise money from traditional investors. Looking back in time, you were scaling. Is there anything that you could have done differently, such that you could have raised that money and IPO'd later or at a later date?
So Keaton's got a better answer to this one than I do. So I'm gonna open up, but I want to say, first, I think as humans, we're all like storytelling machines, and so we tend to rationalize everything we've ever done and assume that it was right. And I think that that's a bit of a mistake. So there should be a lot of things that we feel like we made mistakes on. That said, I also sort of feel like the way that building a company really actually works is you have to be someone who's sort of arrogant enough to jump and think you can build something. And that person who's dumb enough to jump into the game is probably also like not gonna appreciate how hard all the different things are gonna be, and is gonna need to learn a lot of lessons the hard way. And so I do think that like the way this often goes is you make a bunch of mistakes that hopefully don't kill you. And every mistake that doesn't kill you really does make you stronger, because you learn the lesson in such a deeper way than you can ever read in a book or be told by someone else. And so I think we've made a million mistakes, but so far they haven't killed us. They did 99% kill us, but that means you're still kicking. So we made it through. So good mistakes along the way would be my general take.
Yeah. No, I agree. Totally agree with that. And the only add would be almost like focus and prioritization. I think we've learned more and more over time just how important that is. I think when you're starting out, same thing. You have like this group of people that like all kind of believe in it, and they're running in a bunch of different directions, and they can carry a lot of things in a lot of different ways. I think it's really valuable with a startup, right? But then over time, you kind of realize that like, hey, I'm really good at this, but I'm really bad at that. So I need to stop doing that thing. I need to bring someone else in who's way better at that, so we can all get better, right? I think that's always an interesting transition point as you're kind of growing the business, just to know your limitations, right? And like Ernest certainly told me a lot of times, I used to run operations for a customer advocate group, and like, I'm not an operator, right? I'm more about like building things and creating things, whether it's in advertising or helping with this or that, but like asking me to do the same thing over and over again and making it better, that's just not what I'm good at, right? And that was a very hard conversation to be able to like, hey, we need someone else to do this who's way better than you, great. And so like now I can focus on those things. But what happens is as you grow, and the growth that you guys are all experiencing, right? There's so many other things you can do. What if we do this? What if we do that? What if we do that? And it's that kind of like combination of like a little bit of that arrogance and confidence kind of playing out that way. We just realized it over time too. It's like as we were propagating ideas and teams, and every team's needing dedicated resources, we're just doing too much, right? And I think over the last kind of couple of years, right, what kind of helped in our comeback, we just kind of like recalibrated to say, what are the most important things that we need to be doing? What's the one most important thing you need to be doing right now? How do you tell someone who is like incentivized, and not in like a monetary way, but just like, hey, I'm doing 10 things, that's awesome, right? Like we're building. It's like, hey, when you're doing 10, you can't get any done. We need you to do one thing and then do the next thing, and that's what we're focused on now. And that was a big sort of transition. It's still something that we're struggling with all the time, right? Because like, I have a ton of ideas. You can certainly tell Ernie has a ton of ideas. It's like, how do you take that and say like, no, we're not gonna do that, or yes, that's important, or guess what, you can't do that right now. And those are those kind of harder conversations, but we realize like, if we don't do that, it can kind of put you in a really tough spot, especially as you're trying to scale, because you get those like, the feedback loops of like, it's working, do more, and sometimes you can get caught off sides, and yeah, hopefully you guys don't have to do it the same way we did, but yeah, it's certainly something to think about.
That's the most important, like, to the extent the goal of this is to try to provide some of the lessons we've learned along the way. I think do the fewest number of things that you have to do to deliver a great customer experience is the best advice we can give, because if you're in this room, you're an entrepreneur, you're dumb, you jump, and you probably are gonna keep wanting to jump at more things. That's probably who you are inside. And I think that is like the separation point. That's like, you keep jumping at more and more things, you're gonna just take on too much and you're gonna fall on your face. Learning how to figure out what to jump at and what not to jump at, I think is like the hardest thing there is, because you wouldn't have started the thing to begin with if you weren't someone who liked to jump. And if you always jump, it's gonna catch up to you, for sure. Lightning round questions. Craziest car
you ever sold, craziest car you ever bought. Each take one.
I'm gonna tell a slightly different story. The other day, I don't
It's a
listen
lightning
well.
round. It's a lightning
I don't
round.
listen well. I drove past this beautiful black Range Rover that was like, blacked out, tinted. It was like this beautiful brand new car, and it had a Carvana plate on it the other day. And it made me so happy. It was just like what it did to my perception of the brand that we've been working so hard to build. Just seeing like a beautiful car that was perfectly clean with our license plate on it made me super happy. We've sold crazier cars than that, but I didn't drive behind it for 5 minutes, so I'm gonna go with that one.
Yeah, and mine's a bit of a cheat. We did a marketing campaign where we bought a DeLorean, which was like a custom Back to the Future DeLorean. There's a guy in Austin named Bob's Prop Shop. It was like literally down to like the flux capacitor was perfect. So we bought that, and it was like car buying from the future was like the whole idea. We'd bring it around and people would get photos. So that's my cheat. We bought that car, not from a customer, but for our own use, but it's pretty darn cool. And now it sits in our LA office with the wing doors open. It's awesome.
All right, last question is yes or no for time. In my personal life, I have a racing team, and we like to break cannonball, run records cross country. Hertz and Avis have banned most of my friends from renting cars for that purpose. So with all the processes and verticalization and internal efficiency you've deployed, would anything prevent me from buying a vehicle from Carvana in New York and selling it back to you 30 hours later in California?
No. Yeah, we'd be in.
Yeah, we get some flags on the VIN. But
exactly.
Everybody's short Carvana today. Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Hey, good luck to all of you.
Yeah, good
Tear
luck
it
to
up.
all of you. Congratulations.
Yeah.